Welcome to SST College of Arts and Commerce. You are watching SST Edupedia. I am Assistant Professor Varsha Sawlani. In this video, we will look after the hypothesis. This is a part of the research methodology which will helpful for the students of MCOM Part 1 SEM 2 and SYBAF SEM 4. Okay. The topic name is hypothesis. What exactly the hypothesis is? It is a tentative assumptions, or we can say it is a proposition or generalization, the validity of which remains to be tested. So it's a tentative statement in which relationship between the two or more variables we are identifying. So hypothesis may be proved to be correct or incorrect. So the format which we will follow to write the hypothesis is, if a certain thing will happen, then what will be the next effect? For example, the structure of hypothesis is to describe what will happen to the dependent variable if we make changes in the independent variable. So let's look after the few examples of hypothesis. The first is, the students who eat breakfast will perform better on a maths exam than the students who do not eat breakfast. The second example is, students who experience test anxiety before to an English exam will get higher scores than the students who do not experience the test anxiety. The third example of hypothesis is, the motorist who talk on the phone while driving will be more likely to make errors in the course of the driving than those who do not talk on the phone. These are the few examples of hypothesis. Now, when the researchers are making hypothesis, what makes good hypothesis? The very first is, take a solid question. Then do the background research, what the other authors has made the hypothesis. Make sure whichever hypothesis you are taking, it should be testable and there should be independent as well as dependent variables in the hypothesis. Now let's see steps in formulation of hypothesis. There are in all 7 to 8 steps in formulating the hypothesis. The first step is identify the research problem. The researcher needs to identify the research problem. Take example. If we need to find out the effectiveness of two teaching methods, one is only lecture method and another one is lecture cum seminar method. So which one will be more effective with reference to exam marks of the student? So that is our research, we can say research problem. Now the second step in our formulation of hypothesis is, specify the null and alternate hypothesis. Broadly, there are the two types of hypothesis, null and alternate hypothesis. The null hypothesis is represented as H0 and the alternate hypothesis is represented as H1. We'll take example of that only. We are finding out the effectiveness of teaching. So, the null hypothesis is, there is no difference between the two methods of teaching on the scoring marks of the student. And alternate hypothesis is, the lecture cum seminar method improves the scoring marks of the student as compared to only lecture method. So this is the problem. Now out of this problem we have to make the null hypothesis and alternate hypothesis. The null hypothesis is represented as H0 while the alternate hypothesis is represented as H1. And null hypothesis is always a negative statement, whereas alternate hypothesis is a positive statement. The third is significance level. The level of significance we need to decide. That is, broadly there are the two levels of significance. Significance level at 5%, significance level at 1%. It means that risk of making the wrong hypothesis is 5% out of 100 occasions. And this level of significance 1% level, the risk of making wrong decisions is 1%. So this one is better. In every hypothesis, in every research, whenever we are framing the hypothesis, the level of significance should be 1% rather than 5%. The next step is region of acceptance and region of rejection. Now, what is this region of acceptance and region of rejection? Is nothing but in this, there are the two-tailed test and one-tailed test. In two-tailed test, the rejection region is in both the tails of the distribution. You can see both the sides, there is a rejection area, and in center, it's the acceptance region. In case of one-tailed test, the one side is the rejection area, rest entire part is acceptance region. Okay. The next step in this is select an appropriate test. Now, there are so many tests we need to select in the hypothesis, like Z-test, T-test, ANOVA, chi-square, Fredman's, then median, we can say n number of regression. These are the tests which we can take it into consideration while testing the hypothesis. The next is select the test criterion. Out of all these tests, we need to select which one is suitable in our research work. Mainly, the researchers are using these sort of tests. T-test when the sample size is less than 30. Z-test when the sample size is more than 30. F-test, we need to find out the goodness of fit, in which the parametric test is also called it as, where the parameters are there that may be in the form of mean and variance. Next is chi-square test. It is a statistical tool wherein we are comparing the observed result with the actual result, which is given by Pearson. Then ANOVA test, it is nothing but analysis of variance is the full form, wherein we are find out if the survey or the experiment results are significant or not. So in other words, this ANOVA helps us to figure out whether we need to reject the null hypothesis or accept the alternate hypothesis. So these are the common tests which researchers are using in the test criterion. The last step is rejecting or failing to reject the null hypothesis. If we are failing to reject the null hypothesis, then the type 1 and type 2 error may occur. What is type 1 error? Type 1 error means rejecting the null hypothesis when it's actually true. And type 1 error is also denoted as alpha. What is type 2 error? Type 2 error means failing to reject the null hypothesis when it's actually false. It is also denoted as beta. Okay. So these all are the steps in hypothesis. Now let's see sources. How we can frame the hypothesis, which are the sources of framing the hypothesis. The number one is intuition. Whenever we think of certain things comes to our mind, like I feel so because the price is increasing, therefore the demand falls. So that is or might be from say for example 15 June onwards there may be the rainfall. So that is what intuition comes in our mind. Then research studies. When we are doing more of research, going in depth into a research, at that point of time we can come across with so many hypotheses of other previous authors. Then consultation. When we are doing discussion with the experts, with the guides, at that point of time we can frame the hypothesis. Theory, when we are reading the theoretical framework of the topic related to which we are doing the research, at that point of time while reading the theories we come across with so many of assumptions. Observation, when as a researcher we are doing the observation in the malls or in certain market, at that point of time we make the hypothesis. The culture which we adopt while doing the research or which is going on among the customers, and continuity of the research. If on an ongoing basis we are doing the research, at that point of time it's easy for the researcher to frame the hypothesis. So these all are the sources of hypothesis. Now there are so many types of hypothesis. As we already said, there are broadly two types of hypothesis, null and alternate. Apart from that, there is a simple hypothesis, complex hypothesis, directional, non-directional, causal, null, alternate. These are the various types of hypotheses through which the researchers can frame either of the hypotheses. Let's see in detail what is simple hypothesis. For example, in simple hypothesis, the one dependent variable and a single independent variable, both are dependent variable is also one and independent variable is also one. For example, if you eat more vegetables, you will lose weight. Here, eating more vegetables is an independent variable, while losing weight is a dependent variable. So, both are single. Complex hypothesis. In this, the two or more dependent variables are there and two or more independent variables are there. Like eating more vegetables and fruits leads to weight loss, glowing skin, reduces the risk of many diseases such as heart diseases, etc. So, many dependent variables and many independent variables. The third type of hypothesis is directional hypothesis, which gives the directions, which gives the relationship between the variables which predict in nature. For example, the children aged 4 years eating proper food over a 5 years of period have higher IQ level than the children not having a proper meal. So, this shows a direct relationship between the two things. Non-directional hypothesis, it is used when there is no theory is involved. It is a statement that exists between the two variables without any predictions. That is a non-directional hypothesis. The next is null hypothesis, which is always a negative statement and it is denoted as H0. Next is causal hypothesis. In this, there is a change in one variable resulting in a change in other variable. Okay, that's called, there is a effect interaction between the two or more variables. So, all these are the types of hypothesis. Thank you.